widowed cowboy met, an Apache woman and her children in the storm. Her identity changed it all. The wind howled across the empty plains, carrying snowflakes that stung the cowboy's face like tiny needles. His horse moved slowly, stepping carefully through the deep drifts. The sun had long disappeared behind heavy gray clouds, leaving the world in a cold, shadowy twilight. The cowboy, whose name was James McAllister, pulled his coat tighter around him. He had been riding all day, checking the fences and making sure that the livestock were safe from the approaching storm. Now, as he turned toward his cabin, he could feel the weight of loneliness pressing on him as heavily as the snow. James had lost his wife 2 years ago. Her death had left a hollow ache in his heart, one that never seemed to fade. He worked tirelessly on his ranch, keeping busy with chores and the endless maintenance that life on the plains demanded. Yet no matter how much he worked, the silence of the empty cabin waited for him, stretching out like a shadow. Tonight, the storm seemed especially fierce, as if the world itself mourned with him. The horse shivered and snorted, its breath rising in small clouds. James pulled the reins tight, urging the animal forward. He squinted into the swirling snow, trying to make out the familiar shapes of the fence posts that marked the edge of his land. Suddenly, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a trick of the wind, a dark shade shifting through the white haze. But then he saw it again. A small figure struggling through the snow, followed closely by 2 smaller ones. His heart leapt. In all his years on the plains, he had learned to trust his instincts. He knew when someone needed help. Without hesitation, he spurred his horse forward, the animal's hooves crunching over the frozen ground. As he drew closer, he could see a woman, her dark hair plastered to her face by the snow, and 2 children clinging to her sides. They were thin, their clothing ragged and soaked, their faces pale from the cold. The children's eyes widened with fear when they saw him, but the woman held them close, stepping protectively in front of them. James called out gently, "It's okay. I'm here to help. Come to the cabin."
"You'll be safe there." The woman hesitated, her eyes scanning the horizon as if weighing whether to trust him.
Finally, she nodded slightly, and James guided his horse closer, offering his arm to help them through the drifts. The children, a boy and a girl, huddled behind her, shivering violently. The wind tore at their small frames, and James felt a surge of urgency. He had seen people freeze in storms like this before. Every second counted. By the time they reached the cabin, James was almost exhausted himself, but he ignored the cold, helping the woman and children inside. The warmth of the small fireplace hit them like a wave, and the children let out tiny shivers of relief. James closed the door against the wind, the storm now pounding against the wooden walls with relentless force. "Sit by the fire," he said, handing the children thick blankets. "You'll warm up soon." The woman shook her head slightly, refusing the offer of a seat. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. We don't mean to trouble you."
"You're not troubling me," James replied.
"Anyone caught in a storm like this would be welcome here. Don't worry about it." For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the wind outside. James studied them quietly. The woman was strong, though clearly worn down by hardship. There was a fire in her dark eyes, a resilience that spoke of someone who had faced much and survived. The children, though frightened, seemed curious about this stranger who had rescued them. The little girl clutched a small rag doll to her chest, while the boy peeked cautiously at James, his wide eyes reflecting a mix of fear and wonder. James busied himself with practical matters. He fed the horse and checked the stove, making sure it was safe. He brought over bowls of warm broth, handing them first to the children. They accepted the food gratefully, their small hands trembling as they ate. The woman watched them silently and James noticed a flicker of relief cross her face as the children's hunger was eased. After a while, the wind outside began to die down slightly, though the storm was far from over. James poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down opposite the woman. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "My name is Ayana," she said finally, her voice quiet but clear.
"Thank you for trusting me," James said. "I'm James McAllister."
"You're safe here, at least for tonight." Ayana nodded, though her eyes never left the children. They were finally beginning to relax, the blankets and warmth soothing their frozen limbs. James smiled at them. "You're both safe now. No more snow tonight. You can rest." Hours passed slowly. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside, the small cabin felt like a haven. James lit another fire, making sure the warmth reached every corner. He listened to the faint snores of the children as they finally drifted off to sleep, exhausted from the cold and fear. Ayana sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, staring into the flames. James could see the fatigue etched on her face, the tension in her shoulders. He didn't press her for more. He knew that trust could not be rushed. Instead, he told stories of the plains, of life on the ranch, and of the animals he tended. At first, Ayana didn't respond, but gradually, she began to offer small nods and murmured words, showing that she was listening. James realized that, despite their differences, they shared a connection. Both had endured loss. Both had faced challenges that tested their strength. As the night deepened, the storm began to soften into a gentle fall of snow. The world outside the cabin became quieter, more peaceful. James leaned back in his chair, sipping the last of his coffee. He watched Ayana glance at the children, a soft smile flickering across her face as they slept. For the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of hope. Hope that the world could still hold moments of kindness. Hope that, even in the coldest storms, people could find warmth in one another. And hope, perhaps, that this unexpected encounter might mark the beginning of something new, something meaningful. The fire crackled, casting a gentle glow on the cabin walls. James knew the storm would return in full the next day, but for now, in this small refuge, they were safe. And sometimes, that was enough. Outside, the wind moaned softly, and the snow drifted gently across the plains. Inside, James, Ayana, and the children sat together, strangers only hours ago, now bound by circumstance and a fragile, growing trust. The night stretched on, and for the first time in years, James allowed himself to believe that tomorrow might bring more than just survival. It might bring a new beginning. Morning light filtered through the small cabin windows, revealing the soft blanket of snow that covered the plains. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the world sparkling and silent. The wind had calmed, and the occasional sunbeam broke through the clouds, casting pale golden light across the snow-covered land. Inside, James McAllister stirred from a restless sleep. He glanced toward the corner where the children still slept, their small forms curled up under thick blankets. Ayana sat near the fire, her hands clasped around a mug of warm water, staring into the flames. She had barely slept, and James could see the exhaustion in her eyes, though she moved with the quiet grace of someone used to facing hardships without complaint. James stretched and got to his feet, careful not to disturb the sleeping children. He checked the horse, ensuring it had enough food and water. Then he returned to the cabin, carrying a small tray with hot porridge for the children. The smell of oats and honey filled the cabin, and the little boy stirred, his eyes blinking open as he sniffed the air. The girl soon followed, rubbing her small hands together and peering at James with sleepy curiosity. "Good morning," James said gently. "Time for breakfast. You've had a long, cold night." The children crawled out from under the blankets, stretching and yawning. Ayana stood, smoothing the girl's hair and giving the boy a reassuring pat on the shoulder. She looked at James with gratitude, but also with a quiet caution, as though still unsure how much to trust this stranger who had offered them shelter. As they ate, James noticed the small details that spoke of their life before the storm: a worn doll, patched clothing, and the careful way Ayana handled the children's needs. It was clear she had done everything she could to protect them, even in the harshest conditions. He admired her silently. There was a strength in her that reminded him of his late wife, though different, quieter, and fiercely independent. After breakfast, James suggested they warm the cabin more thoroughly. Together they stoked the fire, carried in dry wood, and made small repairs to the walls and windows that the storm had battered. Ayana worked alongside him, her movements careful and deliberate. The children played nearby, their laughter a small but joyful sound that filled the space. James realized how much he had missed the presence of children, how their energy and innocence could make even the coldest morning feel bright. When the chores were done, they sat together near the fire, drinking tea. James tried to make light conversation, asking about their journey and how they had managed to survive the storm. Ayana was cautious at first, offering only brief answers. But as the minutes passed, she began to open up, speaking slowly and thoughtfully. "My children and I, we have been traveling for some time," she said. "We had no place to go, and the snow came faster than we expected. I was afraid we would not make it." James nodded, understanding immediately. He had spent enough nights on the plains to know how dangerous a sudden storm could be.
"You were brave to keep going," he said. "It could have been much worse." The little boy spoke up, his voice timid but full of curiosity.
"Are we going to stay here with you?" James smiled. "For now, yes. You're safe here." Ayana looked at James, her expression mixed with relief and lingering worry. I do not know the land well," she admitted. "We have always moved, always careful where we went. This place, it feels different." James leaned back, considering her words. He understood the weight of her situation. Ayana was not just a woman seeking shelter. She was a mother protecting her children, carrying responsibility that extended beyond herself. He felt a deep respect for her. "You don't have to decide anything now," he said gently. "You can rest, get your strength back. We'll figure things out together." The day passed slowly. James went about his chores outside, checking fences and feeding the livestock, while Ayana remained inside with the children, teaching them small lessons and helping them keep warm. She showed a quiet wisdom in her interactions, always patient, always careful not to rush the children. James observed her from the doorway, feeling a growing admiration. There was more to this woman than met the eye, and he sensed that her story was much deeper than what she had shared so far. By evening, they gathered again near the fire. James had prepared a simple meal of stew, and the children ate eagerly, their hunger from the storm's hardships evident. Ayana served them first, watching them with a gentle but protective gaze. After they finished, she finally spoke more freely. "I am Apache," she said quietly, as if testing the words before saying them aloud. "My family, we have lived in this land for many years. I was separated from them, and I have traveled alone with the children to find safety." James listened carefully. He had known little of the Apache people beyond what he had learned as a child from old stories, but he understood that this revelation carried weight. It was not just about her heritage. It was about the history and challenges she faced in this land. "Thank you for telling me," he said. I will respect you and your family. You and the children are safe here." Ayana nodded, though her eyes showed both relief and caution. She had been traveling in a world where trust was scarce, and even a small kindness could be the difference between safety and danger. James understood that, and he felt a quiet determination to protect them, whatever challenges might come. The children, sensing the shift in their mother's mood, became more curious. "Mama, can we stay here forever?" the little girl asked, her voice hopeful. Ayana smiled faintly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her daughter's face. "We will see, my little one. We must be careful, and we will take things one day at a time." James joined them by the fire, watching the interaction with a soft smile. He felt a stirring of something he hadn't felt in years, a connection, not just with the woman, but with the children as well. The cabin, once empty and silent, now held life, warmth, and a fragile sense of family that had begun to take root. Night fell again, and with it came a sense of quiet contentment. The storm had passed, but the memories of its ferocity lingered. James kept the fire burning, ensuring the cabin remained warm. He could hear the children's soft breathing as they slept, and Ayana sat nearby, her gaze calm but watchful. For the first time since he had lost his wife, James allowed himself to believe that life could bring unexpected blessings. He thought about the day's events, the storm, the children's fear, the quiet bravery of Ayana. He realized that trust could grow in the smallest of moments, that kindness could change the course of lives, and he felt a quiet hope that this meeting, born of a violent storm and desperate need, could mark the beginning of something meaningful, something lasting. Outside, the plains were quiet, the snow sparkling under the faint moonlight. Inside, the small cabin was warm, filled with the subtle rhythms of life, the crackling fire, the soft breathing of the children, and the steady presence of two adults who had found, in one another, a fragile but growing sense of trust. James looked at Ayana, seeing the strength and courage that had brought her and her children through the storm. He realized that, in helping them, he had found a purpose beyond his own grief. And Ayana, in trusting him, had taken the first steps toward a life that, though uncertain, promised safety and care. The night stretched on, peaceful and calm. And for the first time in a long while, James felt that the world outside the storm, harsh and unforgiving as it could be, also held moments of hope, kindness, and unexpected connection. He knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but for tonight, they were safe, together, and that was enough. The morning sun cast a pale light across the snow-covered plains. Inside the cabin, the air was filled with a quiet sense of calm. A James McAllister could sense that the day would bring more than just chores and routine. Ayana had been unusually thoughtful since the night before, her gaze distant as she stared into the fire while the children played nearby. Something in her demeanor told James that she was holding back a story, a part of herself she hadn't shared yet. He watched her for a few moments, unsure how to begin. He wanted to ask, but he also wanted to be careful. Trust, he had learned, could not be forced. Finally, as the children were absorbed in building small snow forts by the window, he spoke gently. "If you're ready," he said, "I'd like to know more about you, about your journey." "Only if you want to share, of course." Ayana's eyes lifted to meet his, and for the first time there was a flicker of vulnerability there. She took a deep breath, as if weighing her next words. "My family—" "They were once a part of a larger community," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "We lived with the Apache people in the lands to the south. But there was trouble. We were forced to leave. I have been traveling since then, trying to find a place where my children could be safe." James listened closely, his expression one of quiet understanding. He had heard stories from older settlers about the hardships faced by native peoples, about families being separated and forced to move. He had never imagined that someone would arrive at his door carrying such a story. Yet here she was, speaking with courage and dignity. "Why didn't you stay with others of your people?" he asked carefully. "Wouldn't it have been safer?" Ayana shook her head. "There are dangers everywhere. Some want to help, yes, but others, they do not. I could not risk my children's safety. Sometimes the only choice is to move, to keep going, even when it is the hardest thing in the world." James nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. He thought of his own losses, of the grief that had hollowed out his life, and he realized that Ayana, though much younger, had carried burdens just as heavy, if not heavier. "You've been very brave," he said. "Most people would have given up a long time ago." She offered a faint smile, the kind that carried both sadness and pride. "I have no choice," she said simply. "My children depend on me. That gives me strength." The children, sensing the seriousness of the conversation, grew quiet. They had been listening, their small faces full of curiosity and concern. James reached out and ruffled the boy's hair gently, hoping to offer some reassurance. The little boy looked up at him, eyes wide, and James felt a protective instinct stirred deep in his chest. Throughout the day, James and Ayana worked together on simple tasks around the cabin. James chopped wood and checked the fences while Ayana tended to the children and helped repair a broken window shutter. The routine of work was comforting, a distraction from the storm of memories and emotions that hovered over them both. Yet the air between them had changed. There was a sense of openness now, a willingness to trust each other a little more with each passing moment. As evening approached, James suggested they take a walk outside to stretch their legs and enjoy the rare sunlight that had broken through the clouds. Ayana agreed, bundling the children in warm coats and scarves. The plains were silent except for the soft crunch of snow beneath their boots. James looked out over the vast expanse, thinking about how small they all seemed against the endless sky, yet how significant each life was in its own way. "Do you miss your old home?" James asked gently, breaking the silence. Ayana hesitated, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but home is not just a place. It is where your family is safe, where your children can grow without fear. That is what matters most now." James nodded, impressed by her wisdom. "You're right," he said. "Safety and family are more important than anything else." They walked in silence for a few moments, the children playing in the snow, throwing small handfuls at each other and laughing. James couldn't remember the last time he had heard such carefree laughter. It warmed him in a way he hadn't expected, filling the cold air with lightness and hope. When they returned to the cabin, the children immediately ran to the fire to warm themselves. James prepared a simple meal while Ayana sat quietly, her mind still on the past she had begun to reveal. She spoke again, hesitantly, as if testing the waters. "There were people who did not want us to live freely," she said. "We had to leave quickly, and we had very little. Some tried to help us, but others brought danger. I learned early that trust must be earned, carefully, or it can cost everything." James felt a pang of sorrow for her. "I understand," he said. "And you can trust me. I will do everything I can to keep you and the children safe." Ayana looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to believe him. Finally, she nodded, a small gesture that carried immense weight. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than words can say." As night fell, James helped the children to bed once again. They fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day's excitement and the cold outside. Ayana stayed awake a little longer, watching them with a mixture of love and concern. James sat nearby, quietly sipping a cup of coffee, letting the fire's warmth fill the room. He thought about the path that had led them to this moment, the storm, the chance encounter, the trust that had begun to grow between them. He realized that life had a strange way of bringing people together, often when they least expected it, and in that thought, he found a sense of hope he had not felt in years. Ayana finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "James, I want to tell you more about who I am, about where I come from. But it is not easy. There is pain in those memories, and fear of what may come if others know too soon." James leaned forward slightly. "Take your time," he said. "I am not going anywhere. You can share as much as you want when you are ready." She nodded, grateful for his patience. "My people, we have lived on this land for generations," she began. "But many have been taken from their homes, moved away, forced to live in places that are not our own. I lost my family that way. I lost friends, neighbors, everyone I knew. I had to start over, with only my children. Every step has been difficult, every choice weighed with fear and hope." James listened in silence, absorbing her words. He could see the strength it had taken for her to survive, for her to protect the children, for her to continue moving forward despite the hardships. "You are incredible," he said softly. "I can't imagine the courage that takes." Ayana gave a small smile tinged with sadness. "I do what I must. There is no other choice. But now I feel that perhaps there is hope. Perhaps there is a place where we can belong, where my children can grow without fear." James felt a warmth spread through him, a mixture of admiration, respect, and something else, something he hadn't expected. He realized that in helping Ayana and her children, he had found a purpose that went beyond his own grief, beyond his own lonely existence. He had found the beginnings of a family, fragile but real, and it gave him a sense of peace he had long thought impossible. The night deepened, and the cabin was quiet except for the soft breathing of the sleeping children. Ayana sat near the fire, her hands clasped, reflecting on the day and the trust she had begun to place in James. He sat nearby, ready to support her in any way, ready to face whatever challenges the coming days might bring. Outside, the snow sparkled under the moonlight, a reminder that even in the coldest places, beauty could be found. And inside, two adults, once strangers, had begun to bridge the distance between them with patience, kindness, and understanding. The bond between them was small, fragile, but it was growing. A bond that promised hope, safety, and perhaps in time, something more. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Sunlight sparkled on the snow-covered plains, making the frozen landscape seem magical. Inside the cabin, the air was warm, filled with the smell of porridge and the soft sound of the children's laughter. James McAllister stirred from sleep and quietly began his morning routine, grateful for the calm that had followed the storm. Ayana had already prepared breakfast. Moving gracefully in the small cabin, she carried bowls of porridge to the children, who were eager and hungry. They ate quickly, their small hands wrapped around the warm bowls, steam rising into the cool air. James watched them with a soft smile, feeling a sense of comfort and belonging that he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since he had lost his wife, his cabin felt alive. After breakfast, James suggested they go outside to work on the ranch. The storm had caused some minor damage to the fences, and he wanted to make sure the livestock were safe. Ayana nodded and helped the children put on their warm coats, scarves, and mittens. The little girl clutched her doll tightly, while the boy watched James carefully, as if learning what a rancher's work truly looked like. Outside, the air was crisp and clean. James led the way to the fences, explaining how to check for broken posts and how to secure the gates. Ayana listened attentively, absorbing everything. She was quick to learn and strong in her movements, and James found himself impressed with her skill and determination. The children followed closely, carrying small tools or helping in little ways, laughing and joking as they worked. As the day passed, James noticed a change in their relationship. The children had begun to trust him fully, following his instructions without fear. They asked him questions about the animals, the land, and his own life. Ayana observed quietly, occasionally offering a word of advice or encouragement. James realized that the bond between them was growing stronger, built on shared tasks, laughter, and the small victories of daily life. During a break, James and Ayana sat on a fallen log, sipping water and watching the children play in the snow. The boy had made a small snowball and pretended to throw it at James, who feigned being hit, making the children giggle. Ayana smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that warmed James more than the fire ever could. "You are very good with them," she said softly, her voice carrying both admiration and surprise. James shrugged, though a small smile touched his lips. "I've had some experience," he said. "Your children are easy to care for, though. They're brave, smart, and kind. They remind me of my own family, of what I've lost." Ayana looked down, her eyes reflecting both sadness and understanding. "I know what you mean," she said. "I have lost so much as well. But I also know that we must keep moving forward, for the children, for ourselves. Life is not easy, but it is worth protecting." James nodded, feeling a deep connection with her. He understood her strength, her courage, and the love that guided every decision she made. And he felt a growing desire to help her, to protect her and the children from whatever dangers the world might bring. As the sun began to lower in the sky, James suggested they return to the cabin. The children were tired, and the cold was beginning to seep into their clothes. They walked back together, the snow crunching beneath their boots. James carried the smaller supplies, while Ayana held the children's hands, guiding them carefully. Inside the cabin, the fire was already warm, and Ayana quickly helped the children remove their wet clothes and get cozy under blankets. James began preparing dinner, a simple stew that would warm them all. The children watched him with fascination, asking questions about the ingredients and how he cooked on the open fire. James answered patiently, enjoying the opportunity to share his knowledge. After dinner, the family sat near the fire, the children leaning against Ayana and James. The cabin felt full of warmth, laughter, and the quiet sense of belonging that comes from shared safety and trust. James and Ayana exchanged small smiles, acknowledging the bond that had formed between them. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, James and Ayana sat together near the fire, speaking quietly. "You've become part of their lives very quickly," James said gently. "I can see how much they trust you, how much they rely on you. And I feel the same way. I trust you too." Ayana looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and something deeper, something unspoken. "It has not been easy for any of us," she said softly. "But I believe that together we can face whatever comes next. I feel hope again. And that is a rare gift." James reached out and lightly touched her hand, a small gesture of connection and support. Ayana didn't pull away. Instead, she allowed herself to feel the warmth and comfort of his presence, a quiet reassurance that they were no longer alone in the world. Over the next few days, their routine continued. They worked on the ranch together, tending to the animals and repairing fences. The children played and learned alongside them, their laughter filling the cabin and the surrounding plains. The bond between James and Ayanna grew stronger, built on trust, respect, and the shared responsibility of caring for the children. One afternoon, as James and Ayanna repaired a broken fence together, she spoke again of her past, though carefully, without revealing everything. "There were times when I thought we would not survive," she said quietly. "The journey was long, the roads dangerous, and there were many nights when I feared I had failed my children. But then something inside me would push me forward, reminding me that we must keep going. That hope, even the smallest spark, can carry you through the darkest night." James listened, deeply moved by her words. "You are remarkable," he said. "I cannot imagine the strength it has taken to keep moving, to protect your children, to face each day with courage." Ayanna's lips curved into a small smile. "I do what I must," she said. "And now I feel that perhaps we have found a place where we can rest, where we can live without fear, at least for a time. That is why I trust you, James. You have shown us kindness, safety, and patience, and that is something I have not known in a long time." James felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of purpose and belonging that he had thought lost forever. He realized that in helping Ayanna and her children, he had found a family, not by blood, but by choice, by trust, and by shared experience. That evening, as the fire crackled and the children slept peacefully, James and Ayanna shared a quiet moment near the warmth of the flames. They did not need words. Their silence spoke volumes. They had faced hardship, uncertainty, and fear together, and now they had found a fragile peace, a sense of connection that promised hope for the future. Outside, the plains were calm, the snow sparkling in the moonlight. Inside, the cabin was warm, filled with the sound of breathing children and the quiet comfort of two adults who had begun to build a life together. The bond between James and Ayanna was growing, strengthened by trust, shared responsibility, and the simple but profound act of protecting and caring for the children. As the night deepened, James realized that life could bring unexpected blessings. The storm that had brought them together had also offered them a chance to find one another, to create a new family, and to discover hope where there had once been only loss. And in that realization, he found a quiet joy, a sense that the future, though uncertain, could be bright. Ayanna, sitting near the fire, thought of the journey that had brought her here, of the hardship she had endured, and of the trust she had begun to place in James. She felt a small but growing sense of security, a belief that perhaps they could build a life together, a life where her children could grow without fear, and where they all could find happiness. The night stretched on, peaceful and quiet, and the cabin held the warmth of hope, trust, and growing family bonds. For James, Ayanna, and the children, life had begun to change. The storm was gone, but its lessons remained. Lessons of courage, kindness, and the power of connection. And as they drifted into sleep, the promise of a new beginning shone brightly, a guiding light for the days to come. The sun rose slowly over the plains, casting a golden glow on the snow that still lingered from the storm weeks ago. The air was crisp, and the sound of birds calling in the distance hinted at spring's approach. James McAllister stood outside his cabin, watching his horse graze quietly. He felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. The cabin behind him was no longer just a lonely shelter. It was a home now, filled with warmth, laughter, and the gentle presence of Ayanna and her children. Ayanna came out of the cabin, carrying a basket of food for the morning. She smiled at James, a small but genuine smile that reached her eyes. The children ran past her, chasing each other through the snow, their laughter ringing across the plains. James felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the joy of seeing them happy and safe. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "Good morning," Ayanna replied, her eyes following the children for a moment before settling on him. "They are growing stronger every day." "I think they are beginning to feel safe here." James nodded. "They are, and so are we." Over the next few days, Ayanna began to share more of her past, revealing the story of her family, her heritage, and the trials she had faced. She spoke of her people, the Apache, and the strength and wisdom that had been passed down through generations. She told James about the loss of her own family and the hardships that had forced her to travel alone with her children. "I wanted to protect them," she said quietly, "and I feared that if anyone knew too much about me, they might bring trouble. But here, with you, I feel that perhaps we can build a life free from fear." James listened, deeply moved. He realized how much courage it had taken for her to survive, to carry her children across such difficult terrain, and to trust a stranger. "Ayanna," he said softly, "I will protect you and the children. We will face whatever comes our way together. You are not alone anymore." Her eyes glistened with emotion. "Thank you, James," she said. "That means more than I can say." Word of Ayanna's arrival eventually reached the small nearby settlement. Some neighbors were curious, some wary. James knew that her identity as an Apache woman might cause whispers and questions. Yet, he was determined to stand by her to ensure that she and her children were treated with respect and safety. One afternoon, a few townsfolk came by, cautiously approaching the cabin. James met them at the door, explaining that Ayanna and her children were safe and under his care. Ayanna stayed behind, observing quietly, trusting James to speak for them.
"We've heard about the storm,"
One man said. "I see you're all right. Are you planning to stay here?" James nodded. "Yes, they are under my protection, and I will ensure they are treated fairly." The townsfolk studied Ayanna from a distance. She stood with quiet dignity, her children at her side. Slowly, suspicion gave way to admiration. They could see the strength in her posture, the care in her gaze, and the calm authority in the way she guided her children. One by one, they nodded and left, their faces softening. Inside the cabin, Ayanna exhaled deeply. "I feared that people might judge us," she admitted. "But with your support, I feel we can face anything." James took her hand gently. "We are stronger together," he said. "And you have taught me that strength is not only about surviving, but about trusting and caring for others." The children, sensing the calm, playful energy between their parents, continued to explore and laugh. The little girl picked up her doll, pretending it was a new friend on the ranch, while the boy followed James around, asking questions about the animals and the land. As the days passed, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. James, Ayanna, and the children worked together, tending the animals, repairing fences, and preparing for the coming spring. The cabin became a place of learning and laughter. Ayanna taught the children about her heritage, sharing stories, songs, and simple lessons from her people. James showed them the ways of ranch life, guiding them with patience and kindness. Through these shared experiences, the bond between James and Ayanna deepened. They learned to anticipate each other's thoughts, to communicate without words, and to support each other in the small daily tasks that made life meaningful. They laughed together, sometimes in quiet moments by the fire, sometimes outside in the snow, enjoying the freedom of open land and the joy of family. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold and orange over the plains, James and Ayanna stood outside, the children playing nearby. The air was calm, and the beauty of the world around them was breathtaking. James took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lift slightly from his shoulders. Ayanna, he said, turning to her, I can't imagine my life without you and the children. Now, you've changed everything for me. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the warm colors of the sunset. And you have given us safety, hope, and a home, she replied softly. I never thought we could find this, not after everything we've been through. But here we have. James reached for her hand, holding it gently. Together, we can face whatever comes next.
We have each other, and that is enough.
Ayanna smiled, a smile full of gratitude, love, and quiet relief. That is enough. The children ran toward them, laughing and shouting about a small snow fort they had built. James and Ayanna knelt down, joining them in their play, the sound of laughter filling the air. It was a simple, ordinary moment, yet it carried extraordinary meaning. It was the proof that they could create a new life, that love and trust could grow even after hardship, and that a family could be formed through care, respect, and shared experience. Night fell over the plains, and the family gathered by the fire. James fed the horse, checked the fences one last time, and then joined Ayanna and the children inside. They shared a simple meal, followed by stories and laughter. The cabin was warm, bright, and full of life, a stark contrast to the loneliness and fear that had once filled it. Later, as the children slept, James and Ayanna sat together, watching the fire flicker and listening to the quiet sounds of the night. The plains were calm, the wind a soft whisper through the trees. They were safe, together, and the trials of the past seemed distant, softened by the bonds they had formed and the love that had grown between them.
You've given us so much, Ayanna whispered, and I hope that I can give you something in return. Trust, partnership, and love. James smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face.
You already have, he said, and I will spend the rest of my days making sure we are all safe, happy, and together. Outside, the moon cast a gentle light over the plains, illuminating the quiet beauty of their world. Inside the cabin, the warmth of family, love, and trust radiated, filling every corner. The storm that had brought them together was long gone, leaving behind not fear, but connection, not destruction, but hope. And so life moved forward. James, Ayanna, and the children worked together, learned together, laughed together, and faced the days with courage and love. Ayanna's identity, once a source of fear and uncertainty, became a point of pride and strength. The community, once hesitant, gradually embraced them, seeing the beauty of their courage, kindness, and resilience. The plains stretched endlessly, but the cabin, the family, and the warmth inside created a world that was theirs. And in that world, the past hardships were softened by the love they had found, the trust they had built, and the promise of a future where they could live freely, safely, and happily. James looked around the cabin, at Ayanna and the children, and felt a sense of completion he had never known. The lonely cowboy who had once faced storms alone had found a family, a purpose, and a love that could withstand anything. And as the fire crackled softly in the hearth, he knew that life, with all its hardships and surprises, had finally brought him home. The snow outside glimmered under the moonlight, a reminder that even after the fiercest storms, beauty, hope, and love could remain. And inside the cabin, laughter, warmth, and the quiet certainty of togetherness promised a new beginning, a life built not on fear but on trust, courage, and the enduring power of human connection.